chairs here now. To be a third chair.
Okay.
It's okay.
Today we're going to start on Ches Amar Aleph, Amar Rava, and it's not the first Amar Rava, it's the second Amar Rava. See how many lines down that is. 5, 10, 15. Maybe it's close to 20 lines down. Yeah. Okay. Thank Hashem. We're able to learn Torah every day. And this was our learning, we should have Beis Hamikdash. Also learning in the Sahaba Golda Bas Bara Binyamin. For anyone that needs to refer Shlema. Okay. We were learning before a statement from Rami Bar Chama. He said that if someone picks up an object from Hefker or an object that was lost, a person can always pick it up for himself. He can acquire for himself, but can he acquire it for someone else? Rami Bar Chama said, yeah. And Rava said that no, he can only acquire it for someone else if he's also acquiring it for himself. So the fact is,
he would be like a borrower.
Not as a borrower, but we're talking about like this, that you can, let's say something is on the street, and you can run and grab it and pick it up and acquire it for yourself. It's Hefker or it's an Aveda or something like that. But if you're not acquiring it for yourself, Rava says that you can't just pick it up for your brother and for this and for that, because there's a lot of people around that would like it, and you have the rights to take it, but not for everyone else, unless you're taking it also for yourself. Okay, so now, Amar Rava says, Hashta Damrit, Tamrin and Migu, now that we say that Migu the Zachil and Afshe Zachinam Lachabri, that if you're acquiring it for yourself, you can also acquire it for someone else. So now, okay, there's a problem with the Cherish making an acquisition. Cherish is a deaf mute. He can't really acquire biblically. However, the rabbis instituted that he should be able to acquire, should be able to take something as his own. Well, let's say a deaf mute and the pikeach find that a pikeach is a regular, healthy person. These two people find an object in the street and they lift it up. So they both acquire it. Why? Because since the rabbis instituted that the pikeach, that the cherish can acquire, so if the cherish is acquiring, he can also acquire on behalf of the pikeach. In other words, if it's partially on the floor, no one acquires it. So they both need to pick it up to get this acquired. So the pikeach picks it up for himself and for the cherish, right? So the cherish acquires it, and the cherish picks up for himself and for the pikeach. And since the cherish, the deaf mute, is able to acquire for himself, as the rabbis instituted, so you can also acquire for the pikeach. Because you need to be able to acquire for yourself to acquire for the other. But that's what that's Rava's statement. The Gemara says, "Bishleim cherish kaner." I understand why the cherish should acquire it. The kamag b'lei ben das. Why does the deaf mute acquire it? Because the pikeach. The pikeach is knowledgeable, and because the knowledgeable person or the one with competent person is picking it up on his behalf, so he acquires it. But how does the competent person acquire it? Who's picking it up for him? It's the cherish. The cherish, there was only an institution that the cherish should be able to acquire, but not that he should be able to acquire for someone else.
The sage is interested for him to be able to acquire.
We're looking at it that it was that the instituted that he should be able to acquire. That was the institution that was just for himself. That he should have some sort of life or whatever. Then people shouldn't take things away from him, and they instituted. But now you're extending it that he should be able to acquire on behalf of the pikeach, the competent person. That's an extension that we never saw that the rabbis instituted. Elaima, rather, we're going to adjust the statement of Rava, and we're going to say, cherish kana pikeach like kana. That the cherish acquires it, the deaf mute acquires it, but the pikeach doesn't acquire it because there's no one that's picking it up on his behalf. The fact that the deaf mute is picking it up doesn't help. So the Gemara says, "My migu." So why did you tell me that since we say migu, since we say migu means since we say since we say that since he's able to acquire it for himself, he should acquire it for his friend. So where do you have that? That was Rabba's whole point. That he's acquiring it for himself, he should be acquiring it for someone else. So it says migu d'shnei charashim ba'al makano, hainamikano. The reason why the pikeach, why the cherish is acquiring it, is because if two deaf mutes would be picking it up, so they would acquire it one for each other, right? They both have the same level of acquisition. So they would acquire it one for each other, and it would be considered acquired. So now that there's a pikeach on one end, a competent person on one end, doesn't make it worse. So now the migu is that since two deaf mutes could acquire it, so we don't make it worse if it's a competent person on one end that the deaf mute should be able to acquire. Gemara says, "Hi Maya, 1 second. Imtim talaymar, if we were to say if we were to say that you can always pick up a lost object on behalf of your friend, and there's no problem. You don't have to acquire it, but your friend can acquire it. So okay, that would only be if you picked it up with intention for your friend to acquire it. But this pikeach he's picking it up for himself. He's not picking it up for the cherish. EU laikani, and he himself isn't even acquiring it. So he can acquire it for someone else. You got the problem over here. If it doesn't work both ways, and it doesn't work one way, because in order for the cherish to acquire it, then the pikeach has to pick it up for the cherish. And we were saying that the only way that he can do that is if he acquires it for himself. But because the cherish picking it up on behalf of the pikeach doesn't work, that means the pikeach can't acquire it for himself. He can't acquire it for himself. How does he let the cherish acquire it? It's a cycle, a vicious cycle. You can't get out of this. If it only works one way, it doesn't work at all. Elaima, rather, let's say mitech leikana pikeach leikana cherish. We'll say it exactly that, but now we flipped the whole thing. First, we started off saying that they both acquire it. Then we said that only the cherish acquires it. Now we're saying that, okay, now no one acquires it. Not the pikeach and not the cherish. But 1 second, if two people that were deaf mute would pick it up, they would both acquire it. Now that one of them is a pikeach, it gets worse for the deaf mute. So it says, over there was an institution that we don't want them to fight. We don't want them to fight with people that are grabbing it away from them. So we wanted that they should be able to make some sort of acquisition. So we instituted that if a cherish picks it up, or if two charishim pick it up, so that they should both acquire it. But over here, over here, what's going to happen? When the cherish realizes when the deaf mute realizes that the competent person doesn't acquire it either, so he's not going to be surprised that he doesn't acquire it. Even the competent person didn't acquire. So we don't have a concern over here if there's a competent person and a cherish that if they both don't acquire. That wasn't our concern. Our concern was only if two charashim pick it up, that there should be an acquisition there. Just like there is by one cherish, should be an acquisition. People just shouldn't be able to grab things away from it. Okay.
So this, because of this sage's institution, the deaf mute could only acquire for himself. It's just exclusive for that, and we can extend like for his friend.
We can't extend it to his friend. He can acquire for himself so that other people can't grab things away from him. That was the institution. They want that the world should be settled, and it shouldn't be that if there's a deaf mute that it's a free for all.
Let people take advantage.
Right. I want people to take advantage.
Is it going to stay like that, or is it going to?
No, that's clear. This is where we're holding. What do you have in the halacha over there? It says probably like this. It says that probably no one acquires it.
It says that if a deaf mute and a competent person simultaneously like found an item, neither acquire.
Good.
Since it definitely does not acquire the item, neither does the competent person.
And they quote from the Rambam. Right? Okay. Okay, yeah, this is the conclusion. Amalei Ravacha Breder Rav Ada Ravashi. Ravacha, the son of Rav Ada, says to Ravashi, Yikud Rami Bar Chama Mehecha. Where did Rami Bar Chama? Rami Bar Chama was the one that said that we see from here that you can pick up a item on behalf of your friend, even if you don't acquire it. Says, if it's from the first case of the Mishnah, he says that he got this from the Mishnah, right? So that's what we learned. Rami Bar Chama said, this tells us, this Mishnah tells us, so we are exactly in the Mishnah. If it's from the first case, which is Shnai Mechsim, two people are holding on to a talis, over there, over there, it could be that the reason why we're dividing it is not because each one picked it up from his friend, it's because we have a real doubt who owns it. In other words, each one's claiming that it's 100% his, so we're dividing it. Now, maybe I thought we could answer this by just saying, well, the fact that we take an oath means that there had to be potential for it to be both of theirs, even without the law. Even without the law of dividing it, we're saying that maybe it's both of theirs not in reality, but because that's the psak of the Bezdin, it's both of theirs. Each one thinks that it's his, and we don't have any way of deciding this, so we just divide it. But now the Gemara is saying that, 1 second, the Gemara is saying that we're dividing it, and therefore we don't have any proof that you can really acquire for your friend. We're dividing it because that's the way that we're going to make the verdict there. But before we mention that in order to have a shvua, an oath, we wanted it to be possibly true, which would mean that the way they picked it up, they acquired it as well. Can you pass me, I want to see what they comment on this. 25. Chaim has a new phone and he is missing the thing. Can you, okay?
Yeah.
We assume that a person has legal capacity to acquire for his fellow. One second. No, that's not the Gemara's question. The Gemara's question here is that no one's claiming that he lifted it for his friend. Each one is saying Kula Shali. That's the Gemara's question. Let me just go back before when we said we had a question. This competent person lifted the object primarily within for himself. Okay, so he needs to have, okay, so he needs to have intent to acquire it on behalf of the other person, which that we don't have in this Mishnah. Okay.
If you're picking it up to give it to the other person, it's already
Exactly.
All
Right.
right. Say, I want to give him.
Yeah, well, what's happening here is that in the Mishnah, each one claimed that I picked it up for myself, and he didn't intend to pick it up for the other person. So where does Rami Bar Chama get that he's intending to pick it up for the other person, and that works?
In the case that one of them wanted to give it to someone else.
Well, we think it's from our Mishnah, Problem is, the first case is clear that they didn't have that intent because each one's saying it's 100% mine.
It's not talking about the first
Oh,
person.
so that's what the Gemara is going to do. The Gemara is going to go to the second and third. Sorry?
If one of them picked up the item with the intention to give to someone else, it would automatically become the other person that lifted with him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we learned. So, Ella Meha Diktani. Rather, it's from the next part. It says Zemer Kulishli Zemer Kulishli Hasulamali. Why do we need a case that each one says this is mine? We already said that I found it, and this one says I found it. So what we're thinking now, what we're really saying over there is that we have a case that's not necessary, and because each one already said I found it. So what we're saying is that because we have an unnecessary case in the Mishnah, it must be teaching me another chiddush, and that other chiddush is that other new law is that you can pick it up for your friend. And it says, well, that's not an extra case of the Mishnah. That we said the first case of the Mishnah was when they found it together. The second case is when they bought it. Remember back on Daf Beis, on the first page of Bab Metzia, we said that why do we have Kula Shali? To teach me that even if one person gave the money willingly, one person didn't give the money, the one person, the seller accepted the money willingly, the other one the seller didn't accept the money willingly, that they're still going to divide it. Elami Seifa. So it must be what we're looking for over here is that someone can acquire something on behalf of his friend. It's from later on in the Mishnah. This one says it's all mine. This one says half is mine. Okay, it says half is mine. Why? Because the other half he's saying belongs to the other person. Picked it up for him. Hasu lamali. Why do we need that case? The Mishnah says you can pick it up for his friend. How do you know that was a Metzia? When he says half is mine. Maybe that's not a case of that where he found it on the street. Maybe that's a case where he purchased it and he purchased only half of it. Maybe you could say that if it's a case of purchase, then what's the chiddush over here? Of course he can, what's the difference? I guess what it means is that there's no difference between this and the first case, maybe. Which is over here the one guy gets 3/4, one guy gets 1/4. We would say that that's obvious. Right. So it's let's say it's necessary. You see, if it's by a lost object, then the chiddush of it would be that you can pick up an object for your friend. But if it's a Metzia, then when someone else is giving it to you, then of course you can acquire it for someone else. Our problem was, you see, the basis of this Gemara is that you can't acquire for someone else when the rest of the world has the rights to that. That's our problem over here. Because when you're taking from Hefker, you're really taking away from everyone else. If you're taking it for yourself, so fine. But if you start taking for your whole family and for everyone else in the world, so they say, 1 second, let them come here and take it themselves. You can't just start taking things for everyone else. Over there, whoever's in there, you can take it.
You can take it for someone else who's there.
Right.
This is only for Hefker items, or does it also apply like for someone selling something?
No, it's only by Hefker where this is an issue. Because if you can acquire things on behalf of someone else, if someone's selling it to you, or if someone's giving it to you, you can say it. You can take it on for. Okay, I'm taking this, but someone's offering it. But when it's coming from Hefker, then since everyone has the rights to it, so you don't have the right to take any more than for yourself.
I mean, like in sales, like if you go, like they're offering an item and you go to the store and you buy all those items.
Yeah, that's fine. You can buy as much as you want.
And it doesn't matter for who.
Doesn't matter for who.
Buying.
You can buy it for yourself or for others. So, but if it's an Aveda, then if it's a lost item, which means that basically hefker, then it becomes problematic. So here we would have a chiddush if it would be an Aveda. But if it's a sale, so what's the chiddush? So Sal Kedait Chamin, I could have thought, you see, there is a chiddush because I could have thought that when he says half is mine, he's really gifting the other person half of it because he could have said it's all mine. Kamash Malan, so really we should make him putter from taking an oath. Just like we said, when someone's returning an object, we don't make him vow how much we don't make him take an oath at the price of the item because he's a Meshav Aveda. And two things. Is a migu, according to one opinion, that he didn't have to do anything here. And if he was a liar, right? Whatever the case is, there's an institution that he doesn't have to take a vow. So we could have thought that this guy that's admitting that half isn't his is like a Meshav Aveda, he shouldn't have to take a vow. So Kamash Malan is coming to teach us the Hayarumi Kamarim that really this is just a trick. And the trick is Savar Iyamina Kula Shali Binishtabui. If I'm going to say that it's all mine, I'm going to have to take a vow. Hey Mahachi, let me say that half is mine, and then I won't have to take a vow. So it comes to tell me that we don't say this. That we don't say that he shouldn't take a vow. We say that Shema Mina. 1 second. Iftar. Ella Meha. Okay, so what the case now is, what we're holding right now is that we do not have a real source for Magbia Metzia Daf you can pick it up for your friend. We thought you can learn it from half when it says half is mine. We said, but no, maybe that's talking about Mekach Memka. They say, but if it's Mekach Memka, what's the chiddush? No, we do have a big chiddush. Elameha. Rather, it's from the following case. If there's two people that are riding on an animal, that's further on in the Mishnah, right? Over there, we say that we divided Hasul Amali. Why do we need that case? Two people are acquiring. They found the animal. They jumped on it together. It's coming to tell me that you can acquire something on behalf of your friend. Maybe it's coming to teach me that riding is considered a kinyan. But that's not so clear that riding and something is a kinyan. We're going to see further. So the Gemara says, Elami Seifa. Rather, it's from the very end of the Mishnah. It says, the last line of the Mishnah is if they both agree, or if there's witnesses, they divide it without an oath. What are we talking about? If it's talking about that there's witnesses, or they agree and it was a sale, you have to tell me that they divide it without an oath. Elalav, the Metzia must be that we're talking about an object that was found. And the whole chiddush is that, yeah, he was actually able to acquire it on behalf of his friend when they admit. Could have thought maybe a third party can come in and rip it off from both of them, and no one, because neither of them acquired it. So it's coming to teach me that they've acquired it because they picked it up for each other. Rava says that it's not really, there's no proof from this, because it could be over here, since he's acquiring half for himself, he's able to acquire the other half for his friend. But in a case where he's not acquiring anything for himself, Rava would argue with Rami Bar Chama that you can't acquire it on behalf of someone else. So there's a machlekes, Rami Bar Chama and Rava, if Magbia Metzia L'Chaver, if someone picks up an item for his friend, even without himself acquiring it, does his friend acquire it? Or can a third party come in and say, okay, you didn't acquire it, your friend didn't acquire it, I'm taking it from you. According to Rami Bar Chama, the friend acquired. According to Rava, the friend did not acquire it, and the third party can take it. It's only if you acquiring part of it, then the friend can also acquire it. That's Rava's view. Two people are riding. We mentioned that it wasn't so clear that riding should be a kinyan, right? But we'll learn from our Mishnah that riding is a kinyan. Amar Rav Yosef. Amali Rav Yehuda. Rav Yosef says that Rav Yehuda told me. Now, Rav Yehuda is a student of Rav, he's a student of Shmuel. Both. Rav Yehuda told to Rav Yosef, Shamet minei de Mar Shmuel, I heard from Mar Shmuel Tarti two things. I heard Reichav Umani. I heard regarding riding an animal, and I heard about leading an animal. leading animals. So you hold the reins and you pull it. Chad kani, the chad like kani. One of them works and one of them doesn't work. Well, if you pull it, that would be Mashicha, and riding it is making it move also. Both of them are making it move, I think. But or maybe the riding it isn't making it move. Maybe the riding it is without making it move. How do they say it over there?
I was just reading that. Sometimes I get confused. I'm not sure.
It never discusses acquiring through riding. For the Mishnah's ruling, okay, that it's a valid opinion.
Like a little bit before it says like sitting on the animal and it doesn't move. Maybe because it has to move in order for it to become okay.
So a person sitting on the animal without causing it to move. Yeah. So over here, he's not actually like kicking the side of it to make it go when he's riding it, because that would be already like leading it, right? That would be pulling it. So he's sitting on it, but he's not kicking it. That's how they make the horse, right? They kick it on the side. So he says one of them acquires, one of them doesn't acquire. And I don't know which one. This is Reb. So Reb Yehuda says one works and one doesn't work, and Reb Yosef says I don't know which one. I don't know which one he told me. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's Reb Yehuda that doesn't know or Reb Yosef doesn't know. How do they just say it over there?
Reb Yosef related to.
No, can't be.
Reb Yehuda was in
So, 1 second. But I do not know which one acquires, which does not. I heard from the master Shmuel. Oh, so it's Rabbi Yehuda that has the doubt. It's Rabbi Yehuda that has the doubt. Okay. He heard from Shmuel that one of them works, one doesn't. He's not sure which one. So the Gemara says, "Hey chidami, are we talking about that there's one that he's riding it alone or he's leading it alone? He's the only one there." The Gemara says, 1 second. How could there be a doubt over here? Everyone knows if you lead an animal, you acquire the animal. That's a regular Mashicha. Why should there be a doubt? Rather, if we're going to say that someone doesn't acquire, it would only be the rider. So why is there a doubt here? But that's a continuation of the question. What he wants to know is if there's someone leading the animal and there's someone sitting on the animal. The question is, what's the halacha? Maybe the rider is the main one because he's actually holding the animal because he's sitting on top of it. He has the real possession of it. Maybe the one that's leading it is the main one because he's making it go. Okay, so we have over here a question: which one would be the main acquisition? The one that's sitting on it, because he's holding it tight, or the one that's making it move? And now, obviously, they're going to fight over it. Whose it is? Want to know who made the kinyan on it? The rider or the one that made it move? Animal Hefka, yeah. Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Amali Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda said to me, let's take a look. Maybe we can figure this out. The Tanan was taught in the Mishnah. Hamanig seifig asar ba'im. If you have an ox and a donkey together, you're not allowed to make it. You're not allowed to make it go. Right? Right. You can't even pull a wagon together. So someone that makes it move gets malchus. He gets lashes. It's a negative prohibition. He gets lashes. It's a type of kalayim.
If the master tells the servant to do it, the master would get lashes.
No, the servant.
He shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Would be the one that makes it move. And also the one that's sitting in the wagon behind it also gets the lashes. Now, Where does he get lashes? Is he making it move by sitting in it? I'm not sure. Maybe it feels the weight when you sit down. He gets lashes. That's Rabbi or Paiter Siyashiv Bekarin. Rabbi says no, he's exempt.
I was just thinking, so I thought maybe because he was getting the benefit.
Yeah, but it's not prohibited benefit.
To get benefit from something prohibited.
Yeah, that's only certain laws have that. So Rabbi Meir says he's exempt. Now, Umida Apich Shmuel, B'tani Chachamim Paich Mesiyesh B'Karan. Shmuel, when he saw this Mishnah, he said actually it needs to be corrected. It needs to be that Rabbi Meir says Chayiv and the Chachamim say Pater on the one that's sitting in the wagon. Shmamina. Now we see from this the fact that Shmuel adjusted the Mishnah is that he wanted the one that's sitting in the wagon to be considered not doing anything. Reichav l'chudei leikani. It must be that Shmuel holds that riding is not considered anything. But kolshkin reichav makamanik. And now for sure, if there's someone that's leading it, for sure the one that's leading it acquires it, and the rider is doing nothing. That's how Rabbi Yehuda figured out what's exactly going on here. Yes, does the rider acquire? Does the one that's leading it acquire? We're saying that's from the case of kalayim, of the mixed the different animals. We see that the rider is doing nothing. Amalei Abayla Rabbi Yosef. So Abaya says to Rabbi Yosef, Zimnin Sagian Amritlan Nechian and Leamtam Shmei Rabbi Yehuda. You've told this to us before, and you never told us that this was in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. You know what? Now all of a sudden you're telling me it's in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. This problem that you said of what Shmuel said, that one acquires and one doesn't acquire, and then how you figured out which one it was, you told us that was your own logic. So Amalei Ivra, you're right. It really is from Rabbi Yehuda. And I even remember something else. And I remember also that we said to him, we had a question on what Rabbi Yehuda said, because the fact that someone's sitting in a wagon doesn't acquire or isn't considered doing anything, he's not holding the reins. He's sitting in a wagon that's behind the animal, but the rider is sitting on the animal itself. There's a big difference. You're proving from sitting in a wagon that's not counted. You're proving from that someone that's sitting on top of the animal isn't considered acquiring it. It's not exactly the same thing. And he said to me, what's the difference between sitting in the wagon and sitting on the animal? Sitting on the animal is holding the reins. So you're holding the string in your hand. But so what? The string doesn't acquire. Holding the string doesn't acquire. So what you're telling me is so different because you're holding the string. That's what helps you acquire. Rav and Shmuel say that the string doesn't acquire anything. Anyway, Ikadamri, there are those that said, Amalei Abayla Rav Yosef. Abaya said to Rav Yosef, Hechi Pashat Mar Reichav Mi Yosef. How could, in other words, it was without Rav Yehuda involved in here. And Abaya's question, it was Abaya that asked Rav Yosef, how could you get from this that riding it doesn't acquire? They're so different. Sitting in a wagon, Yosef Leitaf and Meiseri doesn't have the reins. Reichav Tafas Meisera, the one that's riding it is holding the reins. And Amrlei, and for this, Rabbi Yosef told Abaya, Achitani Idi, that Idi taught that Meisera Leikani, that the reins is not an acquisition. Okay. Itmanami, we have another statement. Amrab Chelbay, Amravuna, Meisera Mechavere Kana, the Metzia, Benechse Ager, Meisera Mechavere Kana, Bemetzia, Benechse Ager, like Kana. 1 second. How do you read that? Meisera Mechavere Kana. That's where I have to do it. The Metzia, Benechse Ager, like Kana. Yeah, that comma is very important. Okay. If you have a let's eat kids, anything. So if you have a sale and you're buying an animal and the owner hands over the reins into your hands, so then you acquire it just from taking the reins. But if you are getting an animal from Hefker, because it's a lost object, or it's a Nichse Ager, it's a convert that passed away without relatives, and whoever takes the property acquires it, that's an example of Hefker, then it doesn't work just to take the reins. You have to actually move it. Yeah. So, my lashon meisera, what does it mean? Meisera, which is the reins. Amarava, Idi asbali kadam ha-meisera davar lechavere. Idi explained to me that it's someone that passes something over to his friend. Meiser means to pass on. So the reins are passed from one to another, and that would be an acquisition. So it makes sense that if it's a sale, that the person acquires it because his friend is passing it on to him. Who's handing it to him? Sorry, who's handing it to him that he should be able to acquire it? Okay, that's what we're holding right now. I guess our question is that a rider, well, so far what we're saying is that a rider doesn't acquire. Maybe that's only by sitting in the wagon. So what's the difference? The reins you don't acquire anyway with the reins. So it's the same thing. Sitting in the wagon and riding comes out as the same thing. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. It says that if two people are riding on an animal, or one is riding and one is leading it, it says that we divide it. Problem is, Mani, which opinion is this? Reb Meir. If we say it's the opinion of Reb Meir that says that he's chayev, right? So what would the chiddush be over here? Remember, Reb Meir's opinion was, well, at least after we switched it, that Shmuel switched it, was that sitting in a wagon would violate the rules of kalayim if two animals were leading it. That means that sitting in the wagon is considered something. So if that's the case, so this is a regular kinyan, two people acquired it together. So elalav rabbanan, it must be that it must be a chiddush. What's the chiddush? That it's the rabbis, and the rabbis say that sitting in the wagon is doing nothing. So shmamina, but we see from this Rachav Kani that there is a difference between sitting in a wagon and riding it. Because riding it, we see from our Mishnah that you acquire it. So Kasha and Rabbi Yehuda said that there's no difference, or Kasha and Rabbi Yosef, whichever version this is. Over here, we're talking about where he's kicking it with his foot, and that's why he's making it go. So the rider over here is not really a rider. The rider over here is not just a sitter. The rider over here is actually making it move. That's the alarm.
Yeah, one of them. I don't know why the alarm is so late.
6:45. Yeah. Maybe it was supposed to be 5:45.
I fell asleep last night without the alarm. I woke up by myself like at 3:30 the whole time.
Okay, so why did the Mishnah say that one person is riding, one person is making it go, if both the rider and the one that's making it go are making it go? So the Gemara says, well, Trey Gapni Manik, there's two types of making it go. How do they say Manik? Leading it? Yeah, okay. Mao the Tame, I could have thought Reichev Odif, the Manik Vitafispa. Mashmalan, that they're equal. I could have thought that the rider now that's making it go as well, he should acquire everything. Because not only is he making it go, but he's also holding on to it. And he's holding on to it. So he should acquire it over the one that's leading it. Mashmalan, it comes to tell us, no, they're both equal. The fact that he's holding on to it doesn't give him superiority over the one that's leading it. They're both exactly the same. Tashima, going to challenge this again about the rider. Is riding considered an acquisition? It's two people pulling a donkey. Pulling a camel and leading a donkey. Now, apparently, this we had in Erevin. If you remember, there was the way that you walk a camel is you pull it from the front. The way you lead a donkey is you hold the reins from the back, and you walk along it, and it moves. But you don't stand in front of the donkey and pull it. By the camel, you stand in front and pull it. Yeah. That was the Gemara Erevin, where a person was stuck outside the Erev. We said Haresa Chamar Gamal. He's a donkey, a camel. Remember that? That's because he would end up, if you're pulling, you would end up getting pulled in opposite directions. So that was the example. You're holding the reins of two animals, they would have to be facing opposite directions, which means that he's pulled to both sides. Okay, so here we have one person is pulling the camel and one person is leading the donkey. Or maybe one person is pulling and one person is leading. They have two. Either they're both doing this, or the one is doing one, one's doing the other. This is how you acquire.
So driving doesn't mean hitting it with a stick. It means walking one side of it, pulling it.
Yeah.
Not pulling it. One is on top.
No,
riding.
One Moshe, there is a rider, but we didn't mention rider in this case. But here we're talking about someone is pulling it from the front, or someone is holding the reins and standing behind the head, like back alongside the body, and makes it go like that. Okay.
Here he says just driving. It's not clear.
Oh, driving. Okay. So it says this is the way that he acquires. Now, what do you mean this is the way? What the Gemara is going to say is that what happened to riding? Riding isn't part of this. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you have to be very specific here. The way you put it, the way the Tanakama put it, is that one is leading and one is leading it and one is driving it. But weren't specific about which one is which, and that could be that maybe he's leading the donkey and driving the camel. The Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's only pulling the camel and driving the donkey. That's how it has to be. Katani Miyas, nevertheless, it was taught. It says those are the two ways to acquire. It's either pulling it or driving it. Driving not on top means making it go, or making it or leading it. Pulling it's leading is misleading because leading it manig is really not from the front. Manig is from the back. You're not really leading as in leading. You're just making it move. But we didn't say riding it. So the Gemara says, oh, so what would that be a problem? Well, this is not a problem. This would be a proof, right? That riding doesn't acquire. Gemara says, Huadin afilu rachav. Really, riding it would also acquire. This that we said, leading it or pulling it or moving it, that's just lafukim with Rabbi Yehuda. That's just to exclude what Rabbi Yehuda said, that he was so specific. He said that you need to have both. You need to have specifically by the camel, it needs to be pulling it, and by the donkey, it needs to be making it go. Kamash Malan, the Tanakama's opinion is that even if it's the opposite, it's also acquires. Even if you're making the camel go and pulling the donkey, that's also good. The Gemara says, 1 second. If that's the case, then why didn't you mix them together? The first opinion should have said, the Tanakama, two people that are leading or pulling, whether it's a camel or whether it's a donkey. Why did you divide it into two separate cases if you're not specific about which one does what? The Gemara says, the truth is that Rabbi Yehuda said that it needs to be specific both by the camel and by the donkey. The camel can only be led from the front. The donkey can only be made to move from behind. But according to the Tanakama, one of them you could do both. Doesn't tell me which one. Some say that the pulling of the donkey does not work. And some say some say that leading the camel is the one that doesn't work. But by the opposite one, it will work both of them. So I have one thing that doesn't work. So what the machlekes the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda is not if it's perfectly you can do anything according to the Tanakama. That's not true. There is one thing that doesn't work. It's unclear which one that was.
I think both work for both. Because when you ride a donkey or you ride a camel, like the person sitting on the camel or the donkey. But when you're moving it from one place to the other, they'll pull it.
We're saying over here that if you don't do the kinyan in the proper way, if you let's say a bike. How would you a bike? A bike, you would you walk it or you ride it? Well, you probably ride it. Okay. Let's say instead of doing that, you just let it roll like by pushing it. But that show ownership. So here what we're saying is that if you take the animal in an abnormal way, it's not considered showing ownership. It has to be done. That's Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be very specific, and Tanna Kama says it needs to be a little bit less specific. There's one by one of the animals, it doesn't have to be this or that. It could be both. And one of them, it needs to be specifically one. Okay. So where we're holding right now is that we're saying that we wanted to say that riding doesn't work because the fact that it didn't say riding. We said, no, we have a chiddush here. We're arguing on Rabbi Yehuda, that's our chiddush. Our chiddush isn't that riding doesn't acquire. Maybe our chiddush is just to exclude the rule of Rabbi Yehuda. Really, riding would also acquire. This the Metzia Daf, some asked from the end of this, it says, B'midazu kana, B'midazu lamutimai. What does it mean? It says, B'midazais. In this way, you acquire. What do you mean in this way? Lav lamuti reichem must mean that we're excluding the rider. It says, Lai lamuti, it's coming to exclude the opposite, which is what Rabbi Yehuda said, right? To exclude what Rabbi Yehuda to exclude to exclude not what Rabbi Yehuda said, to exclude the way Rabbi Yehuda excluded, that it needs to be done specifically. The Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda. So then that's exactly what Rabbi Yehuda said. So why do we have machlekes here, Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda, if you're being so specific? It could be nayo tzad echad leikana. Istam mashiach b'chamar v'kedam yahanagam b'kamal. They're saying that there is one b'midah zayis kano, that there is one of them that doesn't actually work. Can't be both of them the opposite of the normal way. One of them works if it's not correct, if it's not the typical, and the other one doesn't work. And that's the difference. Okay, exactly like the Gemara said. Tashema. Come and listen. If there's one person riding a donkey and another person holds the reins, so it says Zekana Chamar, Zekana Meisera. This one acquires the donkey and this one acquires the reins. It's very clear. Riding acquires. Maybe the easy answer to this. Yeah, the Gemara answers this. Exactly what we said before, how we answered the Mishnah. He's talking about that he's making it go with his feet. That's why. It's not because sitting on it is good enough. It's because he's kicking it. So he's not just a rider, he's also a driver. If that's the case, so why doesn't he acquire the reins? If he's acquiring the donkey, and part of the reins is on the donkey, which is like part of it is like it's not a decoration, it's one of the things that goes along. It's a utensil of some sort of the donkey, so it should be acquired together with the donkey. The trimmings on it. So you're right. He acquires half the reins, and the other guy acquires the other half of the reins. One that acquires the donkey is acquiring half the reins that are attached to the head. It says the one that's acquiring the reins. You see, the reins would be on the floor if he wasn't holding them. Who's holding the reins? There's another guy holding it. So how does he acquire half the reins? Because the other person is lifting it up for him. But the one that's holding the reins, how does he acquire the reins? No one is lifting it up for him.
The commentator is very confused. It says like if he's riding the animal in the presence of the leader, he acquires half. And like if the leader wasn't present, like he would acquire.
He would acquire or he wouldn't?
He would.
It would acquire the animal, but what about the reins? No, but that's the
I don't know
main
why.
point of it here.
I don't know why it doesn't. It's talking about it, and then the commentary is 12.
No, so 1 second, let's go further. You have to go further, 1 second. Yeah, we're on 17.
Oh,
On 17 it says, but the one holding the bridle, they call it over here the bridle. How does he acquire a portion of the bridle? Nobody ever lifted the bridle's headstall. Okay, these are the good words here. Bridle. Is it bridle or bridle?
You say bridle. Yeah, the thing that looks like that.
That's called a bridle, but according to the rules of
they call it
Oh,
a
in
halter. They call it a halter.
a halter. Naftali, what is it? Bridle or bridle? Bridle.
Is it the same word?
Used to tie.
It doesn't
reins.
say. It just
It's
says halter.
bridle.
It's the bridle of the
Okay.
bridle is something I want. It's a kind of bridle that falls apart.
Okay. So it's the bridle. So how does he acquire the portion of the? No one ever lifted the bridle's headstall. Since part of the bridle was never lifted, the one holding the bridle should acquire no part of it at all. The Gemara's position at this point is very difficult to understand. Part of the bridle was never lifted. Oh, yeah, the battery's low. Why does the Gemara understand at this point that the rider requires any part of the bridle, but finds it difficult to understand the position of one holding the bridle? As mentioned, note 16, the Gemara assumes that the litigants of the Bryce's case performed a kinyan hagbah upon the bridle. For this to be effective, the entire bridle must be lifted on behalf of both. Why does the Gemara understand then that the rider acquires a portion of the bridle, just as the bridle's headstall was never lifted at all in regards to the holder of the bridle? It was also not lifted for the rider. That's an interesting question. See Marie Katz, cited in Shita Mikubetzis. Okay. The Gemara is thinking that the rider is acquiring the headstall, the part of the reins that's attached to the head of the animal, and the one that's because he's moving it, but the one that's holding the bridle doesn't acquire it, shouldn't acquire it, because the other end of it, which is the headstall, isn't being lifted. So if it's not being lifted, so how does the one that's riding it acquire? Anyway, but that's what they're asking in the notes. But anyway, the Gemara's question is, so the Gemara answers, you're right. He's only acquiring the one that's leading the animal, the one that's holding the reins, not the leading the animal, the one that's holding the reins. He is only acquiring the part that's in his hand. It's not acquiring any more than that. So it's only the rider of the animal that's acquiring the reins, and this guy only has a little bit of what's in his hands. Hi, Mai, 1 second. If we say that if you lift an object for your friend can acquire, that's only if you're lifting it for intention. So how could the other person acquire it? We're asking on the one that's walking, the one that's holding the one that's holding the bridle. We're asking that he's not acquiring it on behalf of the other person, he's taking it for himself. So how does the other person acquire it? If he would be lifting it for his friend, then he would be helping his friend acquire it. We're saying that when he's lifting it, he can't acquire it for himself. I guess what the Gemara is doing now is asking that question that we had in the notes, that if you're concerned that he shouldn't be acquiring it, then how does the other person acquire it? How does the one that's riding it acquire it? So Rashi says Zekana Chamara base Pagi, Zekana Mashatafas Biade, Bashar Lekana Leilos Evelelose. What's happening is that the headstall, the guy that's acquiring the donkey acquires the donkey and the headstall. The guy that is acquiring the bridle is acquiring only the part of the bridle that's in his hands. And what's in the middle between the headstall and what's in his hands, no one's acquiring. Rabbi Vo says really, as we taught before, that this one acquires the whole donkey and this one acquires the whole bridle. The ability that he has to pull it towards him means that he's able to acquire it, even if he didn't pull it. But nevertheless, that's good enough. The Gemara says, but this that Rabbi Vo said, that's either berusa, which means it needs to be taken out, it needs to be taken out outside, or it's bedusi, or it's maybe a joke. If you don't say, if you're going to accept what Rabbi Vo says, if I have a talus that's partially on the ground and partially on a some sort of stand. Someone comes and lifts up the part that's on the ground. And someone else comes and lifts up the part that was on the stand. Do you want to tell me that the first person acquires it, the second person doesn't acquire it? Because he could have pulled it off the stand. So that means he acquired everything. And that's not true. We say that the person that took it off the stand also acquires it. Rather, what Rabbi Vo said is not accurate. In other words, we say that the fact that you're able to pull it doesn't mean that you acquired it. Okay, Chaim told us at the beginning when we first started about Metzia, from a note that based on this Gemara, that the talus needs to be entirely lifted off the ground in order to acquire it, or else no one acquires it. So how is it possible that they both own it? Because each of them are there lifting it up, right?
One off the ground and one on it from the pillar.
Or the talus was on the ground. The first guy lifts it off the ground, but he doesn't really acquire it till the second guy comes and lifts it up.
Off now. See you later.
Yeah. Okay, safe travels. Tashima, Rabbi Lezer says, Reichev basadeh umanig be'ir. If someone is riding it, he can acquire it by riding it only if he's in a field. In the city, you're not supposed to ride it. Manig, if you're leading it, that would work whether you're in a field or if you're in the city. And kana, that's how you'll acquire it. The Gemara, basically the question is that we're seeing that riding an animal is acquiring, and you told me before that riding is not acquiring. The Gemara answers the easy answer. Hachanami manig beraglav. The rider is kicking it with his foot, and that's why it's considered he's acquiring it. Yachi manig. So then why do you tell me that there's that leading it is acquiring it if this guy, the rider, is also leading it? It says trei gavni manik. There's two types of leading it. So then why riding it in the city, it doesn't acquire it? If he's leading it in the city, that worked. And if he's riding it in the city, you tell me he's leading it also. He's making it go. So why doesn't that acquire it? Because it's not typical for people to drive to ride an animal in the city. So that's why he doesn't acquire. Amali Ravashi Rav Kana. Ravashi says to Rav Kana, funny question. If that's the case that you need to do things in a normal way in order to acquire, if someone lifts up a purse on Shabbos, it's not typical for people to lift up purses on Shabbos. It's muktzah. You want to say that he doesn't acquire it? You want to say that it's not his? Whoever does it acquires it. Whatever you do, even though it's not typical, but nevertheless you still acquire it. And rather what we're talking about over here is that we're dealing with not acquiring from Hefker, we're dealing with acquiring from someone else because it was a purchase. Damalei, and the seller told the buyer, says, go make a kinyan the way it was in a typical way. So there was a condition in this. If you want to acquire it, you have to do it in a typical way. Now, if it would have been, even if it's in a city, if it's in a public domain in the city, which means a large street, so there they would also ride it. Or the Adam Chashav Hukani, and if it's an important person, they ride in the city as well. They come in on their horse, and even in the city. The issue, Kanye, and if it's a woman, it's not typical for a woman to be leading an animal. She would be riding it rather than leading it. Or if it's a person that's so low that has no tact, he's also kind of, because such types of people also ride things in the city. Okay.
I was thinking about this typical thing when it came to the donkey and the camel, about like leading or riding, like they didn't mention, so it wouldn't apply.
Tell me again.
Like whether it's typical to lead or pull the camel
Oh,
or the donkey.
yeah, that actually was what was going on. Exactly that. That's where Rabbi Yehuda was specific about it. And according to the Tanakama, they said no, it was okay to have both by one of them. Yeah, it seems that that was the explanation.
That's why I thought of it, but it went over my head.
Yeah, both by one of them.
Right.
By the camel, you could either ride it or lead it.
Possibly.
Or the donkey.
And the donkey, possibly also you can either ride it, but not both. You can't say both of those. We didn't know which one. Or Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that either way it didn't matter. Either way, it was very specific. That you can only have one way. Kiboy Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar, this is not the Rabbi Eliezer that we just said. Rabbi Eliezer that we just said is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkinus. That was a Brisa. Now this is Rabbi Lazar. This is Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas, the Amira. It says, if someone tells his friend, says, pull this animal in order to acquire the vessels that are on top of it. What's the halacha? Will he acquire it by pulling the animal? So the Gemara asks, Liknes miyamar leikani? If he says in order to acquire it, but he didn't tell him to actually acquire it.
Right.
Is this like a Amelia Bedelia type thing? He didn't. Rather, pull this animal and acquire the vessels that are on it. So, Maha, what's going to be the halacha? Does it work to pull an animal to acquire vessels? Now, we're not talking about he's acquiring the animal. He only wants to acquire the vessels, and he's just pulling the animal like that. Amar Rava. Rava says,
That's not typical. The vessels you would generally
yeah, usually vessels you're supposed to lift up. Yeah.
A lot of vessels.
So v'chitema kisha amda. Oh, 1 second, I skipped something. Amar Rava. Yamala kni behema v'kni bekelim. Let's say he tells him to acquire the animal and acquire the vessels. Mikani kelim. Would that even work? We're thinking now that maybe we can consider the animal to be his courtyard. And if you put vessels into your courtyard, you can acquire through your courtyard. You can say, my courtyard should acquire.
You don't move your courtyard.
You don't move it. You stand next to it and you say, you close the door on it or whatever. You say that my courtyard should acquire. So, so maybe, but the problem is, Rav is asking, says that even if you would acquire the animal and then say, okay, now that the animal's mine, now the vessels are in my courtyard, but it's considered a moving courtyard, and a moving courtyard doesn't work. It will say that the animal stood still. But we have a rule that if it would move, it doesn't work. So it also doesn't work, but it's standing still. So but the rule would actually work if it was tied. The animal was tied, so it needs to stand still. Then that would actually acquire. Well, do we have an answer? I'm not sure. Amalei Rav Papa Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua Rafa. These are the two students of Rava.
Wait, so you didn't conclude the other one?
No. Do you have a conclusion there?
It's bound.
When it's bound, I understand that. When it's bound, then he'll acquire it as a courtyard. But let's say it's not bound and he just moves the animal.
Number 8.
Number 8.
I think it does. I think it doesn't, but I think it does. According to that.
You have a pickup truck, right? So I put my vessel in your pickup truck and it doesn't move. Do I acquire the vessel or have to move it?
If he puts it in his pickup truck.
He puts it in his pickup truck. It's his.
Yeah.
Here, I thought it wouldn't because earlier it discussed about the whole Grado thing, how one person acquired the Grado and one acquired the animal. So, and that's kind of like part of the animal, but it still separates the ownership. If you're
Yeah.
losing it,
In the notes over here, they're mentioning from the Rush that and from Taisvis that there's two types of Mashicha. Mashicha that normally affects the acquisition of utensils is the pulling of the utensils. The drawing near that normally affects the acquisition of the animals is the act of making the animal move itself. Since animals and utensils are thus governed by two different rules of Mashicha, Rabbi Eliezer is uncertain whether the Mashicha of an animal is effective to acquire utensils. Isn't that interesting? So when by an animal, you just make the animal move. You don't have to actually pull it. You're making it move. By utensils, if it's heavy, and then you have to actually pull it, not making it move. The question is if the Mashicha of an animal, making an animal move will be good for the utensils, but it's not actually your power you're pulling.
if I remember reading on the notes that one of the ways to make the animal move is you could just call the animal.
Right. Okay. So now Rav Papa and Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua, these are the later Amirai, Rav students. They say to Rav Elamiata Haya Mahalach Besvina. The Kafti Dagam and Afal Tech Svina. Let's say he's on a boat and there's jumping fish. You jump into the boat. So Hakanami the Chatzar Malach Zivilekani, you want to say that the person on the boat didn't acquire it because the boat is moving? Amalei, so Rabbi responded to them, Svina Menach Naicha, the boat is staying still. Umaya who the Kamamtila, it's the water under it that's moving it. The boat is still.
It's the water.
Sounds like saying, well, the earth is spinning, so you shouldn't be able to acquire anything.
Because it's the earth that's really moving and not you driving it.
Something like that. Well, Amalei Ravina Ravashi, Alamayata Isam Alechas B'Shasarabim, he says to Ravashi, but someone's walking in a public area, a woman. And the husband threw a divorce document either into her lap. It's hard to have a lap when you're walking, but or into her hat. No, kalsa is a basket. Do you want to say that she shouldn't be divorced? We know that she is divorced if the get is thrown into her lap or into. So you're saying because she's moving, she shouldn't acquire it. The basket sounds like it's on her head.
Yeah.
She is walking, but the basket is staying still. It's just like on her head, just like the water in the boat. The boat is staying still, and the boat is staying still. It's the water that's moving. So she's moving, and the basket is staying still. So that's
so she's not divorced.
She would be divorced.
Sure.
She would be divorced. Okay, let's leave it over here.
They add here on the notes that it was also public domain.
Right.
So
Okay. 2 pages behind. Let's see what we can do.
Whoa, we meeting tonight?
No.
Or no? We meet another night.
We'll do Thursday night. We'll try.
are there any short talks?
Yeah, they're all short. It's just I think it gets a little bit easier over here. We're gonna have the stars. This is also give you stars. Okay. Have a good day, Remy.
Thank you. You know, I'm very a little confused in this whole discussion about Kenyan, and this is really a complicated Daf. There's no discussion about Kavana. It seems that would solve all kinds of problems, but I don't see anything like that. It's all about the physical activity without the discussion of intent.
I think the intent part is a given. that he always needs to have kavanah.
Let's say I see a dog running around my yard with a leash. And I take it by its leash to take it somewhere. Makes all the difference in the world if I'm intending to acquire it, or if I just want to
Right,
take
Right.
it somewhere, get rid of it.
Right.
So you're saying it's just assumed that that's
Yeah.
there.
right.
Okay,
Yeah, I think you have to say that.
okay. Thank you. Good day.
Okay, okay. Atzlacha.